According to journalist and author Sam Quinones, several converging forces created a perfect storm of opiate addiction that is sweeping across the country. Unfortunately, here in New Mexico, it's an old story. And what is new, however, is the occurrence of a paradigm shift that is increasing the problem in rural and suburban demographics. In April, NMIF correspondent Megan Kamerick sat down with Quinones to talk about his book, Dreamland, The True Tale of America's Opiate Epidemic.
Sam Quinones, thanks for joining us on New Mexico in Focus.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Meg.
So your book describes several converging forces that created this perfect storm of opiate abuse and overdoses that we're now seeing around the country. In many places, heroin addicts began by taking legal drugs, specifically oxycodone. A doctor you spoke with in your book in Ohio actually said they wouldn't be selling this quantity of heroin on the street right now if they hadn't made these decisions in the boardroom. Explain that.
Well, basically that there was a revolution in pain management that took place beginning in the 1980s, really revving up in the 1990s, that held that we were a country in pain and we didn't need to be, that there was more of a tool that doctors had but had not been using, and that was opiate painkiller pills. And these are pills that people now know very well: Percocet, Vicodin, Lortab, OxyContin, of course. And that we needed to very aggressively prescribe these pills, not at first for just dying cancer patients, and that was understandable. Allowing people to die with some kind of level of decency and absence of pain is a good idea. But eventually the idea became, we use these for all manner of ailments and all manner of surgeries and all manner of and chronic pain and post-injury and all this kind of stuff. And what ends up happening is that they make the argument, the pharmaceutical companies and the pain specialists together make the argument that science now knows that these pills are virtually non-addictive, was the buzz phrase. Less than 1% of all people using these pain pills get addicted to them. That was the other phrase they used. And they used this idea to convince doctors that science now knew that widespread aggressive prescribing of opiate pain pills was almost virtually risk-free in terms of addiction. And that convinced, and basically it was a new conventional wisdom took hold that this was okay, and that was the last 20 years. The problem is that that was not true.
They based this on kind of faulty data.
They based this on very little evidence. There still is no evidence that that is true. Some people do not get addicted to these pills. Other people do. It's very difficult to know ahead of time who those people are going to be, particularly if doctors have very, very little time with their patients, which is now the case in most of American medicine. And so you are getting overlaid on this system of getting very little attention to patients in a very short amount of time. You have these pills that come in as the ultimate time saver. You know, pain can be a very tricky, almost an art in treating, and you have these pills that come in and say, this is the solution. It's a very easy one. Plus it ends the doctor's visit. He pulls out the prescription pad and gives you a prescription, end of visit. It's a perfect tool for doctors to kind of keep their practice humming along and without any problems. And the problem is, though, that it has proven not to be the case. That first of all, lots of people have grown addicted to pills that they use exactly as doctors prescribed. On top of that, it has created an enormous, massive new supply of opiates all across the country, because doctors all across the country are prescribing them. And a lot of that has leaked out into the black market, or kids get into the bottles in the medicine cabinet, and that has created a whole new, these things together have created an entirely new population of opiate addicts. And of course the drugs in these pills are molecularly, chemically very similar to the heroin, and so when those pills either run out, become too expensive, the high isn't quite enough, and so people transition to heroin. And really, I don't know of many people who are newly addicted to heroin who did not start with opiate painkillers.
And you go into great detail about the advent of kind of a new form of heroin that came up from Mexico, black tar heroin.
Yeah.
Far more pure than the heroin that had been, and cheaper.
It's far more potent. It's less pure in the sense that it's semi-processed, so it has a lot of impurities in it, but it's just as potent. And the guys who I talk about who are selling it, who are very active in this area, Santa Fe, Albuquerque, and surroundings, they make it themselves. They don't sell it to other people, and normally heroin, the way heroin was worked, particularly was a lot of it come from the East, Turkey and Burma and some places. It would sell several times, and each person would dilute it a little bit, and so by the time it got to the street, it was DEA found it was usually 6 to 18% pure heroin. These guys were selling, we're getting the opium, transforming it into black tar heroin, and selling it themselves at 60, 80% purity. And that is what transformed a lot of areas in the country, has led to a lot of overdoses. And in this area in particular, because they were very active and still are very active, I understand, in this area, is a lot of overdoses were due to that as well.
They're from one small state in Mexico,
Yeah,
Nayarit, and you called them the Jalisco Boys.
Right.
Their business model is quite astounding. It's almost like a fast food franchise.
Bizarre, yes, like the Domino's Pizza of heroin. They set up a system that answered a need in among addicts, and that was, I as an addict don't want to go to some scuzzy motel or bar or Skid Row or place like that. These guys will deliver it. They'll deliver it at convenience. We'll get it to not your doorstep, but nearby. And what's more, there's a telephone number you can call if the dope was weak or didn't work for some reason or another. You can call, and they're all about customer service. They're all about branding. These guys don't use guns. The classic, Scarface model of carving out market share with the barrel of a gun. These guys don't do that. They use. They
did it through service.
Yes, and convenience and branding.
Unbelievable.
And convenience and all of that. Particularly when you're selling a product that people have no choice but to use as addicts, it is a remarkably potent business model.
You know, this epidemic, their business model reached into communities never seen heroin, into
Right.
rural white America, suburban white America, young people in particular. Right. Why was it moving so effectively into these areas?
Well, first of all, a lot of those folks were getting addicted to pills. These guys were important for two reasons. They're not the only heroin traffickers in America. They're not the only black tar heroin traffickers from Mexico in America. They're important for a couple of reasons. First of all, they're a vanguard of the new way of selling drugs in America, which is absent the gun, without the violence, without the stuff that will cause police and public attention, political attention to your problem. These guys are all under the surface. They don't use guns. So they're a new vanguard. But because their model, because they all knew each other, they were all from the same town, they couldn't kill each other. So the way they make more profit is they expand, and they kept on expanding. And they began, coincidentally, they land in the areas where pill addiction was first taking hold in the late 1990s in Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky area. They land there in 1998, and they begin to kind of merge almost. They find this new market. They are the first traffickers of heroin in this country to recognize and then systematically exploit this brand new market, using this system that sells a very addictive product in very capitalist ways, with branding and customer service and convenience, all of which they learned in markets where there was no expansion. They had been in Salt Lake and Portland and Vegas and LA and in times in the mid-1990s when the addict population was static. So how do you get market share if you can't kill your competition, because you know those guys, you know where their mothers live and they don't know where yours lives? Well, you develop these customer service mechanisms, and that's, I think, what served them very well, in quotes, as they went, and then they found this new market. They were the first ones, though, to recognize the pill market as something transformative in the heroin underworld. So
you talk about in New Mexico and other places, there were a couple nationwide busts of this ring.
Right.
And one of those included busting several clans in northern New Mexico. It sold heroin for generations and then
Yes.
started getting involved with these. Did those have an effect, or did they?
Well,
they're still here.
I mean, it has some kind of effect. First of all, it was the first time that law enforcement began to piece together that these guys who look like really small-time street dealers and minor league players were all connected. there was a famous meeting of the DEA in 2000 where all these guys who had been developing these cases against people from this town didn't really understand the connections, all meet in Los Angeles, Minneapolis, Portland, and Seattle, Albuquerque and Santa Fe, Phoenix, and other places in the East, North Carolina, places like that. They all come together and they're telling the same story. And they put people's faces, mug shots up, and they go, hey, I arrested that guy in Denver. Oh, this guy, I arrested him in Phoenix. That's when they first begin to put together that this is not a whole lot of isolated minor street dealers, but this is one big system that works all across the country. Started here.
So where are things now in terms of then prescribing of opiates? Have doctors stepped back on that? And the availability of heroin, do we see any movement in that? Where do we find solutions?
Well, yes, we are seeing, I believe, doctors, some doctors never bought the conventional wisdom. It's important to note. There are a lot of doctors out there who are skeptical about the virtually non-addictive slogan. But I think what's happening now is many doctors are beginning to more judiciously approach how they prescribe these pills for what, to whom, and crucially, in what quantity. Sometimes these pills are very, very effective, but they don't need to be prescribed in quantities of 60 or 120. You can prescribe and have the same effect prescribing after surgery in, say, 8 or 10 pills that you would 60, because most of the time people don't use anywhere near what they're prescribed, and those pills are just lying around waiting to be abused. And so the problem we now face, though, is that all our heroin comes from Mexico. No longer does a lot of it come from Burma or Turkey or Vietnam. Almost all our heroin comes from Mexico. It is cheaper, it is more prevalent, and it is more potent than ever. And this causes a lot of problems when people are trying to, first of all, they start using heroin because it's cheaper and more prevalent. And then after rehab, it's so much more easy to find now, so much cheaper to find. And when they rehab and come out of many months of not using, a lot of people relapse. And when they relapse on this heroin, as opposed to stuff that was more stepped on from years past, there's a higher likelihood that they'll overdose and a higher likelihood that they'll die. Very scary idea.
As we wrap up, Sam, this has happened to, of course, we know a lot of parents. For a long time, they were silent for years and years and years.
Right.
Things are changing now. What role are parents playing in that?
Yeah.
And you also say that you think heroin might be the biggest force for positive change in our country.
It's a weird concept, but it's true. I believe that heroin spread because of silence, because no one talked about it. When I was first writing my book, I had a heck of a time finding people who would talk to me, parents who would talk to me, because everyone was mortified. Everyone was ashamed that their kids were addicted, or in the obituaries they'd make up, well, he died of a heart attack at 25, or just suddenly died. No one was talking about it. Everyone was afraid. Everyone was living alone. We were all isolated. Isolation is heroin's natural habitat. It feeds on isolation. I believe what is happening in some communities, and maybe Albuquerque is one, I think there's some movement this way that's very, very encouraging, is that people are coming together and in community. Remember, this is a story about isolation versus community. You can do a whole lot more, and solutions present themselves when people work together, talk about these things, bring it out into the public view. And sunlight, as one Supreme Court justice says, is the best medicine, and that's certainly true. And I think that, yes, we're seeing patients, or I'm sorry, families put cause of death in the obituaries, Facebook groups, parents being far more energetic. And this causes political attention. This causes budgets to be devoted where before were not. So you are seeing the beginnings of a community building in areas where there once was just people suffering in isolation. And that, I guess, is maybe one legacy of heroin. Sorry to had to take that to get to that point, but it may be one of the positive legacies of the drug. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, Sam, I thank you for talking with us. So stick around. We'll do a little bit more on the web. But thank you for coming on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.